are live. Nathaniel, hello, and lovely to have you join us on the show today. How are you?
Good. It's lovely to be here.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your practice? I have mentioned to the group that you have a background in sports psychology, which is particularly exciting from my perspective, coming from a lot of embodiment myself. And you're new to North Brisbane psychologists. So welcome to the community. And could you just let us know your interests, your passions, and where you come from?
Sure. So I'm new to North Brisbane psychologist. I've only been working here about, I think this would be my third week starting on Monday. So very fresh to the new workplace. And a little bit about me is I'm completing my endorsement as a sport and exercise psychologist. So my studies involved learning to be a psychologist first and learning to be a sport and exercise psychologist second. So naturally, what I tell a lot of my clients is I'm a regular old psychologist like many others, but I have a particular interest and expertise when it comes to working with athletes and performers of many kinds. So my interests naturally align with Alexis's in the sense that I'm very interested in embodiment and the physical body and movement and everything that goes along with that. A little bit about me outside of all of that. I moved to Brisbane from Perth 3 years ago. I grew up on the west coast of Australia. And that was where I did most of my studies before coming here. And naturally, I liked Brisbane a lot, so I chose to stay. Now I'm still here. So in my work, I work with lots of different people with lots of different contexts and presentations. It's not just athletes and performers. More often than not, it's just general mental health concerns with whoever walks through the door. So I see a lot of anxiety and depression. I see trauma. I see all sorts of things.
Okay, and that brings us to our topic for today. When we were discussing what we might speak about, Nathaniel and I realised that we do have this shared interest, as Rachel shares the interest in the linking between the mind and the body. And there's a large body of evidence now to suggest that these techniques, the inclusion of the body within our healing process is not just a luxury, it's a necessity to really address trauma at the underlying level. And so we'll be talking a little bit today about how you might recognise some of your symptoms that might relate to trauma. But also we'd love to give you some really practical applications that you can start to use in your daily life. Nathaniel kindly reminded me that, whatever we're talking about does stir up the emotions. And so this can be a helpful thing to do that in a safe environment like this one. But also that it's really important that you do reach out, particularly to professionals. And of course, there is always Lifeline. And I don't know about you, but I've called Lifeline in need, and they were exceptional. I cannot rate them highly enough. And just so accessible. So if any of you are experiencing trauma, we cannot recommend highly enough that you reach out to Lifeline. Having said that, we're going to keep it fairly general today. So I'm interested in, what is trauma to you, Nathaniel? How do you even put some language or definition around trauma?
So I always start with acknowledging that trauma means very different things to different people. And I obviously come to it with a lens as a therapist through my own education in a university setting. But as I've practiced more and more, I've shifted and changed my own definition personally, and how I would describe trauma in the way that I would approach asking a client about it is I would define it as something that was confronting or distressing that you didn't have the means at the time to cope with. And therefore, it had to be shut away somehow, or it needed to be coped with in some certain way that left the event or whatever it was unresolved in memory and in mind. So you're left with what can be a very, very uncomfortable entity that just sits in your mind that you need to do something about. So that's where the therapy comes in. And that's how I look at it. But I always start with every client that I see. If I'm asking questions around trauma, I ask them what they think trauma is, so that we can work together on what definition best suits them as well.
Yeah, that is a really beautiful question, and potentially something that people might even journal if there is a sense of recognition. What is trauma? And I like your use of the word entity. Yeah, it kind of gives a sense of it, having some kind of shape and form and something that I can work with, and even potentially that it kind of sits outside of me. It's not who I am, it's not my identity, but it's something that influences my behaviors and my responses. That very much aligns your definition with Bessel van der Kolk's definition. He says that it's any event which overwhelms the nervous system. And it alters the way that we process and recall our memories. And again, that was my experience of trauma, was a definite recognition that I was over responding in a hyper state. So the need to bring the nervous system back down to ground zero is clearly the first step. So again, we'll be having a direct experience of that later on. How do you see it manifest? I mean, I think some of our listeners may have a sense that trauma exists as an entity in their lives. What are some of the ways that people may recognise it, especially those ones that they may be lesser known, or they might not have necessarily connected that there's this entity that's causing some influence?
It's an interesting question. I mean, there can be lots of different signs, and the ones that are most salient to us as therapists are the ones that are outlined in our diagnostic manuals, which are flashbacks and inability to sleep and all of those kinds of things. But they're not the things that I actually see a lot of the time. They're the rare cases where it's very clear cut that someone might have post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that. But where trauma might actually exist, and where I might start asking questions around, have you felt that something traumatic has happened to you in your past, is when people might encounter certain events or certain things in their lives where they really feel like they're overreacting to certain things. So a very general example that I encounter a lot of the time is people shutting down or feeling panicky or bordering on an anxiety attack when someone raises their voice. And that's a very common thing that happens out there in the world. There might be people shouting in a train station, or there might be someone trying to sell something in the street. I guess less so in a Western context, but when you go on holiday. And if you find that happens and this huge, overwhelming surge of anxiety comes up in you, that's where I might start asking the question of, well, where's that coming from? We don't know. And there's lots of different other kinds of things as well that could lead to that. It may not be yelling. It may be in a relationship context. It may be in response to pressure. It could be a lot of different things. And where we'd start asking questions is where an overreaction might be occurring. And it's not always trauma. Sometimes it's anxiety. But generally, the signs where I start to notice them is in anxiety.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that the overreaction is a common sign, and that leads to this kind of feeling of numbing or association or avoidance. which again is where the grounding practice, and when I say grounding, what I really mean is to come into awareness of the body. You know, my understanding of the term grounding is that it's come from yoga. Yoga has pretty much brought it into the mainstream because the yogis knew the experience of feeling anchored in your body at an experiential level. And my understanding and my direct experience of dampening and settling that hyper-reactive response comes about through feeling more grounded and more centered, so that I can build some tolerance to some of these distressing emotions in a way that I still feel safe, I still feel okay, I still feel, you know, generally calm, so that next time that emotion comes up, I'm not so overwhelmed by it. It's over time, as you mentioned earlier, lesser and lesser and lesser. And I've kind of reclaimed that more empowered response rather than it having, you know, power over me. How would you describe the process of resolution and recovery from trauma?
Well, I was certainly spurred into that thinking when you use the word safety, in the sense that very often trauma, as we've been talking about, it's an overwhelming of our body's capacity to cope. And what can happen when we go through such a awful process is that we lose a sense of safety in ourselves. And the resolution or the treatment associated with integrating a traumatic experience involves making the body a safe place again, instead of something that's feared, because so much of trauma is a feared bodily response to a triggering event, which we've talked about already. And that can be very, very confronting for a lot of people. And when we don't have the resources to make the body a safe place, we tend to go to resources that aren't particularly adaptive in the long run, things that can make us feel safe in the short term, like chaotic relationships, substances, impulsive behaviors, all those kinds of things that make us feel safe in the short term. But the resolution in the long term involves a bit of work in making the body a safe place again. And the thing is, you'll carry your body everywhere you go until the day that you leave this world. So if we can make the body a safe place where if triggering things happen in life, then we can effectively cope with anything. So that's where we move towards in therapy. And it's very possible to get there. I've seen people do it time and again, whether it takes, I mean, the shortest time I've ever seen it happen is in 5 sessions, whether it takes 5 sessions or it takes a couple of years, it can be done. Anyone can do it.
And how? The big question, how? And especially those things that people can apply, you know, at homes, even on their Sunday afternoon. You know, there may be family in the next room. Do you have any suggestions on how people can start to build a safe experience in their bodies?
So there's a lot out there, obviously, that can seem very mystifying in terms of, you know, go to therapy. That's very mysterious and scary a lot of the time. And then there's the trauma therapies that I guess are the gold standard that float around. If anyone's ever Googled how to treat trauma, and there's this thing called EMDR, which is the gold standard, but none of that can really be done at home on a Sunday afternoon. And that's why my treatment approach that I always start with every single time is with mindfulness practice, because this practice has been around for thousands of years, and there's a reason it's stuck around that long. And psychology is now just catching up in terms of applying this to the treatment of trauma. And it's where I start therapy with every client of mine that's been through some trauma. And what it involves is grounding the body in the present moment through whatever bodily sensation or whatever is existing in the moment that you can focus your attention on. And when we tend to direct our attention in that way, we tend to innately activate some processes that allow us to integrate what might have been incredibly confronting and distressing through trauma, through regular, deliberate practice, which I can teach anyone in 10 minutes if need be.
Yeah, awesome. We would love you to share that. We will leave some time at the end for any questions as well. If anyone has any comments, please do post below, because we have Nathaniel's wisdom and experience to draw from. So please let us know some of the things that you're noticing. If you have any specific questions about how to practice grounding, how to practice mindfulness, how to build upon these psychological constructs, like we've spoken about, seeing trauma as an entity. And also, there's any ways that you have found to be particularly helpful that you might like to share with the community. So what I'm hearing is that mindfulness is the first step in your treatment. Is that right, Nathaniel?
As my treatment sort of modality goes at the moment, in terms of what I do with my clients who've been through trauma, it is mindfulness practice and deliberate, regular practice as well as we go. And the good thing about it is you don't have to make time to do it. You don't have to budget time out of your day to sit there and do it. You can do it anytime, anywhere, as we'll get into. And just while we're talking about it as well, I wanted to elaborate just a little bit in terms of the entity of trauma, and elaborate on in terms of where the therapy goes with that entity, that externalization of trauma, in terms of the trauma can exist outside of our narrative as people, as something that's happened to us that we haven't been able to process and we haven't been able to cope with the resources that we have. And I've thrown around the word integrate a couple of times so far. And what this refers to is turning that entity of the traumatic event that happened in the past somewhere, from something that we have to keep re-experiencing every single time we're triggered, into something that can exist in the past and will stay there in the past as part of our past narrative, no longer an entity that keeps harassing us, but as just something that happened that we can remember. It doesn't mean we just forget the traumatic event, but remember without all the barbs attached to it, without all the ways that it just keeps stinging us. And through mindfulness practice, we can accomplish that over time. And that involves a lot of approaching that event in a safe, structured environment where it doesn't have to be something we have to be so scared of anymore.
Yes, thank you for that big picture. And it makes me light up, because that's exactly what I've written on my page in preparation for this conversation, that it starts firstly with grounding and centering and returning the locus of control inside me. Having come from, a background in contemplative practice, yoga therapy has been my bread and butter for more than 15 years. And I have found that mindfulness is kind of considered a bit of a cure-all. And I found it to be, while on some level, there's an aspect of truth, there's also some myth around it. And I think it, as you mentioned, the integration, I think that is really an important aspect of the practice. And I just wanted to mention that we did talk, Rachel and I spoke last week also about distress tolerance. And my personal experience has been that firstly we center, we then compassionately embrace, which is again building a different relationship with the entity, one that's not resistant or avoidant, but embracing, actively approaching. And then that third step is integration, which I think has a social aspect as well. That I'm then able to assimilate and feel a sense of congruence inside, outside. I mean, that's my experience of integration. And it lights me up to hear you using these words, coming from, an academic psychology background. There's a real meeting between contemplative practice and psychology. And it's so exciting that that's really starting to take place. And my understanding is that it is through this recognition of the body as the practice and the mind as the theory. So thank you so much for that reminder around integration. And I think it's a good time for us to have a brief practice, even 5 to 7 minutes, and then we've got time to respond to any of our listeners.
Sounds good. So shall I just crack straight on then?
Please, yes.
Okay, so what I'm about to guide you all through is a common starter practice of mindfulness that I would introduce to most clients from the outset in therapy if they'd, one, never done mindfulness before or had done mindfulness in a different way, or I would chop and change it a little bit depending on the client and their needs. If, for example, what we're about to do might be confronting for them, I'll do it in a different way. So if at any point during this activity you notice anything particularly distressing or confronting coming up for you, make sure you cut it off there and just try to distract yourself with something else so that you can tolerate whatever it is that's going on for you. We don't want to escalate it in the moment, especially because we're just doing a live thing at the moment. It's not like you're in a room with me as your therapist or with someone else as your therapist where we can contain that sort of thing. And if anything that comes up for you is particularly distressing, make sure you reach out to helplines, as we were talking about before, and all of that information can be found on the NBP website. So with that being said, what I would like you to do now is find a position in your chair or wherever it is you are that is comfortable for you, where you feel like you can bear most of your weight onto either the chair or if you're laying down onto what you're laying down on, so that you don't have to spend too much thought on holding yourself up wherever it is you are. But it's perfectly valid to do this while standing as well. Now, what I would like you to do is pop both of your hands out in front of you with the palms up, a bit like this. And I'm popping them on my hands, so I'm on my knees. So I'm doing this with everyone at the same time. And what I would like you to do while you have your palms facing up like this and you're listening to my voice is either keep your eyes open or shut them, whatever's most comfortable for you. And then I'd like you to try and direct your attention to see if you can find any sensation on the inside of your hands. See if you can just take a moment to direct your attention straight down to what you might feel in your hands. What you might immediately notice is that it's very easy to feel the sensation on your skin, because we spend a lot of time paying attention to what we can feel with our skin, the outside of our hands. But what we don't pay much attention to is the feeling on the inside, under the skin. So take a moment to direct your attention there. See if there's anything under the skin in your hands. As you're doing so, you might notice some thoughts about, am I finding the right thing? Am I doing this right? This is weird. I can't find anything. All of these thoughts are normal and valid. I just want you to notice them as we go and direct your attention to that feeling if you found it, or that area if you haven't yet. Now, as you direct your attention there, I want you to imagine you're wrapping your attention around the area much like you'd wrap a sandwich in Glad wrap. Imagining you're wrapping the area in that Glad wrap as much as you can. And as you do so, you might notice your attention wander to other thoughts, other things, background noise, thoughts of dinner in an hour, thoughts of any old random thing. I just want you to notice those and direct your attention back to the feeling that you found. Or if you haven't found any, the absence of a feeling. Because the absence of a feeling is a feeling in itself. Now, as you hold your attention there, these thoughts that are coming up to distract you, I just want you to notice them, as we were saying before, and turn your attention back to the feeling. There's a common saying that goes, energy flows where attention goes. And right now we're trying to direct our attention, our energy, into that feeling that we found inside our hands. If you notice that you followed a thought for a particular amount of time, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Just notice it and return your attention to the feeling. It's perfectly normal to have tons of different thoughts during this practice. Our minds chatter away all day, every day. But one thing that is always under our control, always under our locus of control, as we were saying before, is our attention. It might be something that can drift very easily, but we can always bring it back, always. Whether it's for a second, 10, a minute, there's no need to judge how long we can hold it there. Just direct it back to the feeling that you found. Because these judgments about what we're thinking about, how long we're thinking about it, they're just thoughts too. All of this is just thinking that will pass if you choose to direct your attention elsewhere. And right now, all we're trying to do is pay attention to this feeling in our hands. Now I'm going to let you do that for 30 seconds by yourself. And if you'd like, you can also add a little bit of a thing on top of what we've been doing, which is every single time you notice a thought, say to yourself in your head, I'm having the thought that, whatever the thought is. So I'm having the thought that I can hear Nathaniel's background noise. I'm having the thought that can't wait to have pizza tonight. Let's try that and bring your attention back to the feeling. I'll give you 30 seconds and then we'll wrap up. Okay, when you're ready, open your eyes. And if you found that particularly difficult, that's completely okay. It can be a challenging activity. And the reason I pick the feeling in the hands is because people typically don't pay much attention to that. So it can be pretty easy to hold your attention there because it's something new. But you can do it with anything. You can pick one thing to pay attention to at any time, whether it's in your body or outside your body. And that's why mindfulness doesn't take any time out of your day to practice, because you can do it while you're on the train, while you're in the car, while you're at work in your lunch break, just paying attention to what you're eating. It can be done anytime. The hands are just where we start, or where I start. Everyone starts somewhere different.
That was a really beautiful practice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your practice with us. It always feels really personal, you know, quite an intimate thing to share a practice. Yeah. And you know, I've no doubt that, you know, those who joined us have a, you know, the experience, the direct experience of a shift of awareness, even if it is just that extra layer of, oh, I'm thinking that, you know, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. Yeah, the thing that I did want to share it was occurring to me during the practice that there's a need for those who experience trauma to not only connect with the sensation within the body as a means to build our distress tolerance, but also as a language for connecting with our feelings and emotions. And there's quite a lot of evidence to show that this ability to put language to our feelings, and I'm really talking about the bodily experience of feeling, whether it is the puffiness or the glad wrap or the weight or the substance. There's that's a step towards being able to identify, oh, I feel heavy, I feel relaxed, I feel calm, I feel steady. But there's there's a connection between the bodily experience and the emotional articulation, and that is a necessary step, certainly for trauma and for all sorts of mental disturbance or disruption. The ability to recognize my feelings and then put language around it. So I just wanted to make that connection, because again, I think sometimes the mindfulness is just, it's kind of seen as a, I don't know, I think the integration with the rest of psychology and the rest of healing modalities is necessary for us to really understand the real value, of mindful practice.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when it comes to trauma, the body is the most important part. And that's why I start with the body and we go from there.
Gorgeous. Well, thank you. So wonderful to hear your experience and insight. And I'll take a quick look to see whether there's any comments. And if you do have anything to share, please let us know now, because we've just got a couple of minutes before we wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I think when it comes to trauma, the body is the most.
So yes, Vida says, any resources that we can read about dealing with trauma? So yes, thank you, Vida. We'll put some resources. I'll put some links below, and perhaps if you have some of your favourites too, Nathaniel, we could add those. And yeah, there's some wonderful resources out there. I'm a huge fan of Bessel Kolk and his book, The Body Keeps the Score. It is very science oriented, but it does help. It gives plenty of case studies so people can recognise it for themselves.
One I've been recommending a lot of clients lately is How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPera. That one can be a lot more approachable than The Body Keeps the Score, in that The Body Keeps the Score can be really, really interesting, but there's a lot of science in there, and us therapists find it amazing, but as a person dealing with trauma, that can be a harder one to digest. So How to Do the Work can be a good one too.
By, what was the author again?
Dr. Nicole LaPera.
LaPera, thank you. So there's plenty of thanks, and Liz and Anissa and Amy are watching, and Gwenda. Thank you all for joining in with us today. And there's not a lot of comments or questions, which tells me that, thankfully trauma is making its way into the mainstream conversation, and really wonderful that you could join us, and we hope that you'll share this video and other information with anyone that you know who may be experiencing trauma, which is specific to Brisbane at the moment, considering the recent floods. There is certainly trauma in the community, so important that everyone has access to resources to help.
And that reminded me of one thing to say, just
please.
That I completely forgot to put at the start. If it feels traumatic to you, it's trauma. In in that trauma doesn't have to be the typical things that we see in the media. Sometimes trauma can be, bullying. Sometimes trauma can be a particular relationship that was really hard. It doesn't have to be a natural disaster or something drastic that involved, the typical one is war. Many things can be traumatic, and it depends on the individual as to whether or not it's trauma to them, because what was trauma to one person may not be trauma to another. So it depends on you.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, if you wouldn't mind putting LaPera's book a link, then that I think will allow people to continue the conversation for themselves. We'll certainly be back next Sunday live at 5. We'd love to see you here again, Nathaniel. Please, let's make a time. We also have Rachel and I run a monthly practice group where we use communication skills that are certainly an extension on mindfulness. And help us to identify our feelings and then to communicate with others. So that's the last Sunday of every month. I'll put the link to that meetup group below as well, because tremendous value in the pro-social aspects of recovery. And the only other thing I'd love to mention, because it has been very powerful for me in my practice here, is a link to trauma-informed policy, which may be one to share with your workplaces, because we really do need, as you were saying earlier, Nathaniel, that those safe places, even safe geographical places. So yes, Vida, if you have an opportunity to share that with your work colleagues, that'd be wonderful. Anything else to sign off on, Nathaniel?
No, that was really all. As I'll always say to all my clients, all feelings are valid, and whatever you are going through deserves to be heard by a therapist or the people around you. So make sure to reach out if you feel like you need help. Because if you feel like you need help, then you deserve to reach out for help. Yes, thank you for that reminder. So thank you for joining us, everybody, and enjoy your Sunday evening. And Nathaniel, we'll catch you next time. Okay. See ya. Ciao.